Hello Yogins, and welcome back. This is Yogi Doug Johnson, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about judgment. Okay everyone, so today's subject is judgment. Before I talk about that though, I do want to thank my patrons on Patreon and everyone who's donated via PayPal and Venmo over the last year or so, 2 years or so. You guys have made all of this content possible. And if you'd like to become a patron, please check out the links below in the video below. So thank you so much gratitude to you guys allowing me to do this work the way that I want to do it, which is on a donation basis. So if you're out there, you're listening to these talks, you're getting something from it, consider paying it forward, letting others have access to this, putting it out there, supporting the channel, supporting me, supporting this community, so that other people can benefit. Even if you never watch another video of mine again, if you learned something, if you got something, that's one way to look at it, paying it forward. Okay everyone, so if you have been a student of mine for any amount of time, if you've listened to almost probably any of my talks, you've heard me speak a little bit about judgment. Why is judgment so important? Well, because spiritual teaching, as I approach it and I teach it, is really about peace, about an internal sense of peace and calmness. This brings us the awareness of the truth, which is the oneness of all things, our unity with all things, this awareness that really the separation that we sense and that we feel and that causes our suffering is really ultimately an illusion. But the way that I see it, and when I talk with students, and also from my own personal experience, it's judgment that is one of the biggest obstacles for people. I don't know if it was that way in the past or not. I suspect it was, based on some of the teachings of teachers like Jesus. But certainly for people today, at least in the communities that I teach. So in North America today, 2021, it really is judgment that is a huge problem for people. And I understand. We live in a very divisive time. It seems like there are a lot of issues that we need to take a stand on. So it can be really difficult to understand why we should give up judgment, why that's important for us, and how. So this talk is going to be a little bit about that. Why do I want to give up judgment, and how? The why, just very briefly, is that, again, it takes our peace away. So we actually suffer because we judge. And again, many of you might be thinking right now, well, I can't not judge. There's too much evil in the world. There's too many problems. I need to judge people and situations and do something about it. The truth of the matter is we can do things without judgment. So again, this is something I hope to draw out with this talk and discussion. All right, so this first piece of scripture is from a book that's published today under the title Dream Conversations. It's by a Buddhist Zen master named Muso Kokushi. He was the teacher to the emperor, which was pretty much the highest honor you could have in Japan. You know, the emperor was seen as basically an incarnation of God in Japan. So if you can imagine, you are the spiritual teacher to God incarnate on the planet. That's a pretty big honor. So this is from an excerpt from his book. And I highly recommend reading the book. It's very short, but very dense. So it's very full of very powerful spiritual instruction and teaching. So highly, highly recommend it. The version I have is by Shambhala Publications. So here it is. It is said that people who are truly on the way, so students of spirituality, do not discuss judgments of others. This does not mean that they make judgments but suppress them, right? So this is something I see a lot in yoga communities, yoga studios, yoga people. They will be upset about something, but they'll smile anyway. They won't like someone, but they will pretend to. These types of things. This is repression. And this isn't really what true spirituality is about. This isn't about pretending that you feel one way, but actually feeling another way. So again, it's not about pretending that we don't judge people or just keeping our mouth shut about our judgments. I'm not saying that's not a good idea a lot of the time. If you have judgments, at least if you can recognize, that my judgments really don't have any weight or validity, so I'm just going to keep them to myself. This is definitely a step in the right direction. But what he's talking about is repression or suppression. This is a huge thing for many people on a spiritual path. Again, many people will have desires, sexual desires, cravings for food or various things, and they will try and suppress them, thinking that that makes them more spiritual. And while there is value in discipline, there can be value in giving up things to learn about ourselves, what Dave Osprey calls spiritual fasting. So we can fast from social media, we can fast from certain kinds of food, we can fast from sexual activity. There are many kinds of fasting that we can do, and this can be spiritual in the sense that it lets us know who's in charge, right? So as long as I feel like I have to have a cigarette, the cigarette's really in charge. I'm not in charge. As long as I feel like I have to have a beer at the end of the night, or I'm going to go crazy, again, the beer is in charge. So again, I think most of you have heard me speak about this in the past. It's about compulsive, addictive behavior. So if I can give something up for a while, this shows that I'm not addicted. I don't have a compulsion around it. Having said that, some people will take something that they enjoy, but again, they think is unspiritual, and then they will try and pretend that they don't enjoy it. They will try and pretend like the desire is not there. That doesn't really work, and it doesn't really help us. So unfortunately, there are people all around the world today who are practicing this kind of spirituality, and I have to really, really question its value. Again, with purpose and intention and knowledge, temporarily giving something up can be very beneficial and very powerful. But generally, it is a temporary thing. If I simply repress or suppress something, this is not helpful because it doesn't pick up the roots of that desire or compulsion. It's going to, the minute I let the pressure off, that will just return. So again, there are unhealthy desires, compulsions, and it's not about a thing. So someone can have a healthy relationship with, say, alcohol. They can have a healthy relationship where they just simply enjoy it. They don't feel like they need it, but they enjoy a glass of beer or a glass of wine every now and then, simply for pleasure. They just enjoy it. Same with coffee. Am I drinking coffee out of a compulsion? I have to have it. I'm not happy without it. I'm drinking more and more and more coffee. Or am I drinking coffee just because, I just love the taste and the aroma? There's a savoring of it. So very, very different. And so again, this is an area where I find a lot of confusion with people because they think they're becoming spiritual, so they start trying to just give up stuff that they think is unspiritual. So sex, drugs, alcohol, caffeine, various kinds of food. And they think as they're doing this, they're becoming more and more pure, more and more spiritual. Having been on this path for a very long time, I see very little evidence of this. Again, if you're under the tutelage of a teacher and they know what they're doing, and I have to say it, there are a lot of spiritual teachers who don't know what they're doing. A lot of spiritual teachers who don't know what they're doing. But if you have a teacher, they know what they're doing, and they tell you to give something up, again, usually it's going to be temporary. It may not be. I'm not going to say there isn't a reason, but usually it's going to be temporary, and it's, again, so that we can become aware of a compulsion or an addiction that is related with that, something we think that we need. Okay, so let's get back to the text. This does not mean that they make judgments but suppress them, okay, which is what we're just talking about. Oh, I'm spiritual, so I don't make judgments. No, that's not what he's talking about. It means they do not see people in terms of self and other. Okay? It means they do not see people in terms of self and other. This is the crux of all deep spirituality that I've come across in my lifetime. What is the self? Who am I? What is the I refer to? If you go deep enough into your meditation, into your spiritual work, if you do inquiry with a teacher like me, eventually through what's called direct pointing or indirect pointing, we can come to the realization that there really is no self in the way that we tend to think of ourselves here. The self that we think we need to protect, the self that is superior to others or inferior to others, doesn't really exist. So this is what he's referring to here. Okay, back to the text. The third patriarch of Zen said, "In the realm of being as is, there is no other and no self." Okay? A scripture says, "The nature of reality is like an ocean. You should not say there is right or wrong." So again, no self, no other, no right, no wrong. All of these things are things that our mind, the human mind, creates. Duality, the idea of a right and a wrong, a self and an other, things that are separate and different from one another. Whereas, like the quote says, the nature of reality is like an ocean. So the ocean, everything is flowing, moving into one another. There's one great spiritual picture, you might say, that's used a lot, which is that you are like a wave on the ocean. And so a wave is not separate from the ocean, right? A wave is made up of nothing else but ocean. But yet there's a wave there, right? We can say, well, there's a wave, and then we can say there's no wave. So it's not that the wave doesn't exist, the wave exists. But does the wave exist separate from the ocean? Absolutely not. Does the wave exist separate from other waves? No, because they're all part of the ocean. All right? So it's a pretty powerful analogy, and this is not how most human brains process their experience. So deep spirituality, this type of spirituality that we're learning here that I teach, is about, you could say, retraining the brain to actually experience reality as it is. And again, why are we talking today about judgment? Because this is one of the biggest barriers to seeing reality as it is. It strengthens something that we call the ego, which is this false sense of self and other. It's not that the ego is evil or bad or an enemy. It just is confusion. It just isn't true. It's just not really the way things are. So it's not like we're trying to defeat the evil ego or anything like that. It really is, we're trying to see reality as it is. And what teachers like Buddha and Jesus and Krishna and many others, there have been teachers like this all across the world, in every culture and tradition, and every time there are always people who wake up to reality. And what they are trying to show us is that things are not the way that we see them to be. Okay, so let's go back to our scripture. If people view the world in terms of distinctions between others and self, they will inevitably make judgments of right and wrong. So what he's saying here is, as long as you're seeing yourself as separate from others, you're just going to have judgments of right and wrong. If they entertain views of right and wrong, they are not true practitioners of the way, even if they refrain from expressing their views. So again, if you are there and you're thinking, oh, you know, this person's right, that person's wrong, this person's good, that person's bad, this action is good, that action is bad, then you're not really practicing Zen Buddhism the way that he's presenting it here, even if you're not saying that out loud or expressing those views. And I would go on to say that, again, if you're doing this, then this is creating suffering for you. This is really the reason we want to let it go. It's disturbing our peace. Okay? It's not allowing us to really rest in our true nature. He goes on to say, rather than to refrain from discussing judgments of others, therefore, students of Buddhism should turn around and reflect, who is it that speaks of others' right and wrong? Okay, now this is called inquiry. And inquiry, again, is present in just about every spiritual tradition that I've come across that has a deep roots to it, that isn't just a religion or isn't just a set of beliefs that we're supposed to believe. It is something that really can get to the core of what's going on. Again, reality, put us in touch with reality. So who is it? Who is it that speaks of others' right and wrong? Now, this talk is not about inquiry, so I'm not going to go on and on about that today, but this is a very powerful thing for us to begin to ask. And if you've never asked yourself, who am I really? Who is this? What is, when I say I am, what am I really referring to? If that's never crossed your mind, I really recommend that you start to consider that. Because again, the ego just tends to say, well, me. And then if you persist and say, well, what do you mean me? As I've said in prior talks, very often we start to tell a story. Well, me, I'm Douglas, I grew up in Manhattan, I was born in the 70s, yada, yada, yada. But this is the past. You're telling a story. And again, spirituality is always about the present. It's not about the past. It's not really about the future, although you could say it's about creating a different future or a better future. But it really is about the present. Okay, so we're going to continue on. A scripture says that people take the physical constitution to be their own body and take the reflections of sense data to be their own mind. And in my experience, this is absolutely accurate. Most people think this is their body, and most people think that the thoughts and the sense data that they receive, that is their mind. So again, this is where most people, if you ask them, who are you? What are you? They're going to point to this piece of meat. This is me. And then again, if you persist or they're somewhat spiritual or religious, they might say, well, okay, I'm not this piece of meat, but I'm the soul. I'm the spirit. And then again, they might start describing their personality. Or if they've had an experience like this, they might describe past lives. Oh, I was Cleopatra in a past life, and I was this and I was that. But again, past. Who are you right now? In Zen, we have a question. Who were you before your parents were born? And again, some people might think that, oh, well, I was Cleopatra in a past life. That doesn't answer the question. Okay, who were you before your parents were born? Or what is your original face? These are ways that Zen tries to get us beyond the mind's intellectualization of who we are, the mind's story or idea of who we are. Who are we really at our core, at our base? If we cut everything else away, what is left? That is a question that deep spirituality asks us to reflect on, because the answer is very powerful and it changes everything for us. So let's continue. What this scriptural saying means is that what ordinary people think to be their self is not the true self. And if you do not know what your true self is, you cannot see others as they are either. This is one of the most powerful sentences, I think, in this whole section, maybe even in the whole book. If you do not know what you really are, if you do not know your true self, you cannot see others as they really are either. So if you can't see yourself or others as you really are, let's ask the next question. It begs the question, are you in a position to judge? Are you in a position to judge? If we put rose-colored glasses on you and then send you into a room with a bunch of swatches of color, and ask you to pick out green and blue and yellow, are you going to be able to do that? And this is exactly what the ego is essentially. It is essentially like putting on glasses that distort our perception of reality. So as long as we have the ego and its functioning, we really can't trust its judgment. We can't take its opinion of reality at face value. We have to question it. And again, guys, I'm bringing this up because especially today, with politics, with coronavirus, with vaccinations, with masks, with everything being politicized in our culture, at least again here in the States. I can't talk about other places in the world, but I know it's happening here, and I suspect it's happening elsewhere. But with all of these things, there's just so much division, there's so much hatred, there's so much judgment, where we think we have enough information to condemn others, to criticize others, to judge others, to think that, well, the science says this, or this person says that, so that's the final word on it. I would encourage you to be a little more skeptical and to be a little more gracious to your fellow human being who may have a different opinion or a different view than your own, and to be a little more humble and to maybe entertain the possibility that actually you are the one that has it wrong. I don't care what your view is. Again, I am not taking one side, vaccinated, unvaccinated here. I am asking you to, whatever position you're in, to at least get into the mental space where you're willing to entertain that, oh, whoops, I got that wrong. Actually, the person who decided differently than me, they got it right, okay? So he says, if you do not know what your true self is, you cannot see others as they really are. If your ideas of self and others are both untrue, how can you judge right and wrong? There it is. If your ideas of self, yourself, again, I'm this body, I'm these thoughts, I'm this personality, if that's wrong, which it is, according to this tradition and other traditions in spirituality, you are not your ego, you are not the story of self, as Eckhart Tolle would call it. If your ideas of self and others are both untrue, and again, as long as you don't really know what you are, you don't know what other people are. Okay? Unless you really can answer that question. And again, this isn't about inquiry or deconstructing the self, this particular talk, so that's something we can look at another time. And really that's something better looked at one-on-one with me or another teacher, where you really deconstruct the identity of the self. So if your ideas of self and others are both untrue, how can you judge right from wrong? Again, how can you judge which color is which if you have glasses on that are distorting your color? Now, every human being likes to believe that she isn't distorted, right? Everyone loves to believe that, okay? If you voted in the last election, then your idea is you voted for the right person. And anyone who voted differently than you, they voted the wrong way, right? We all believe this. So the person in the voting booth next to you who is voting the opposite way, they also believe that. Same with religion, right? Many people think they have the one true religion. And then you ask the person next to them who has a different religion, and they have the one true religion. It's not that hard to see that everyone can't have the one true religion. Why are you special? Why do you have the inside track on truth, or the right religion, or the right vote, or the right politician? What makes you so special? That's the question we really want to ask ourselves. Because every human being, the way that we're constructed, again, the way that the ego works, we think we're right at the center of everything. And we think that we've got it right. And what I want you to start to question is this narrative. To be a little more humble, to be more in line with the truth. How can we know we have got it right? How do we really know? What assurance do we really have other than our friends who agree with us and pat us on the back and say, yeah, you're right? What evidence do we actually have? So back to the scripture. Ordinarily, people who assume they are on the way and do not talk about others' right and wrong still define good and bad in their minds and make distinctions of sharpness and dullness in people. Conceptualizing shallowness and depth of understanding, they contrast error and correctness of practice. Such people cannot proceed directly towards supreme enlightenment, so they are encouraged not to pay attention to judgments of right and wrong. So basically he's saying here that if right and wrong are still arising in your mind, which is probably the case, it's the case for me, then you are encouraged to not pay attention to that, okay? That you need to learn to let go of that, to not pay attention to that, okay? So this is, again, a practice. This is something that we can do. I want to do a part 2 of this talk where we're going to look at a different scripture, and we're going to again look at judgment and also what we can do about it. But this here, you've got 2 practices here. And again, these are practices. They only really, you may agree or disagree with this talk, that really isn't that important from our perspective. What's important is doing the practices. So one practice is, who is it that speaks of others right and wrong? And don't let your mind answer. Don't let this conceptualizing brain that we have tell you the answer or try and answer that question. That's not going to get you anywhere. You need that answer to come from a deeper place. And if you feel unable to do that, that's where I recommend meditation. You start meditating. I have meditation instructions on my channel. You can come to me for one-on-one instruction. We can do private. But meditation helps to begin free the mind of that which would obstruct us from getting that direct perception of the truth. So this is one practice. And the other is, you are encouraged to not pay attention to judgments of right and wrong. So this is a great practice for us today. Again, we live in an environment where in my lifetime, I don't think I've ever seen it, where it's so heated and people are so entrenched in their view. And so again, I'm not here advocating for one view, a liberal or a conservative view. I'm not advocating for or against vaccination. I'm not advocating for or against masks. What I'm advocating for is compassion, love, understanding, and recognizing it's above our station as human beings to judge. I've given a talk in the past contrasting judgment and decision. Yes, you may need to decide whether you're going to wear a mask or not into a store. You may need to decide whether you are getting vaccinated or not. That's as far as you need to go. Getting vaccinated and then condemning everyone else who doesn't as wrong or stupid, anti-vaxxer, dangerous, whatever it is that your mind comes up with, this is not helpful for us. And the other way too. So we might be anti-vax and see people who are getting vaccinated as sheep or stupid or blinded by, this fake science, what they might think of as fake science, or politics, however you see it. So this isn't really for us. And again, this is not another judgment. I'm not telling you that this is a bad idea because you're wrong or you're evil. I'm telling you this will take your peace. This will take your joy. And again, we'll discuss that and we'll look at that with another scriptural reference in my next talk. Until then, I feel very, very grateful for you if you've made it this far. If you're on YouTube, please consider subscribing, liking the video. All of those things really do help. Commenting, just saying hello or thank you or asking a question. These things really do help on YouTube. If you're on Patreon, then thank you so much for your support. Again, I cannot tell you how grateful I am. You make this possible. So thank you so much. Until next time, namaste and have a great day.